Hello, friends. This is Lakshmi, and today I choose to talk about the poem titled Obituary, written by A K Ramanujan. Now, A K Ramanujan is a poet, translator, folklorist, and critic, and he was very much interested in linguistics and cultural studies. He wrote both in his mother tongue Kannada and in English. After his studies in India, he went over to the USA and became a teacher of Dravidian studies and linguistics, South Asian languages and civilization, and anthropology at the University of Chicago, USA. He is also an excellent translator of Kannada and Tamil literary texts into English. He was successful both in India and abroad. Now, this particular work titled Obituary, a short poem, it was published in 1971 as one of the poems in his collection of poems titled Relations. Now, Obituary, the title, you know what obituary means. Obituary is a notice that is usually published in the newspapers when a person dies, and it includes usually we see a photograph, and even if the photograph is not there, a brief biography of the deceased person, his job and his family members. That is the obituary. And this poem titled Obituary by A K Ramanujan, let's see what he tries to tell us in this poem. I'm just reading the poem first. Father, when he passed on, left dust on a table of papers, left debts and daughters, a bedwetting grandson named by the toss of a coin after him, a house that leaned slowly through a growing years on a bent coconut tree in the yard. Being the burning type, he burned properly, at the cremation as before, easily and at both ends, left his eye coins in the ashes that didn't look one bit different. Several spinal discs, rough, some burned to coal, for sons to pick gingerly and throw, as the priest said, facing east, where 3 rivers met near the railway station. No long-standing headstone with his full name and 2 dates to hold in their parenthesis. Everything he didn't quite manage to do himself, like his Caesarean birth in the Brahmin ghetto and his death by heart failure in the fruit market. But someone told me he got 2 lines in an inside column of a Madras newspaper, sold by the kilo exactly 4 weeks later to street hawkers who sell it in turn to the small groceries where I buy salt, coriander, and jaggery in newspaper cones that I usually read for fun. And lately, in the hope of finding these obituary lines, and he left us a changed mother and more than one annual ritual. Now, that is one obituary of its kind. Now, that is one strange obituary. This is an obituary of the narrator's father. And when we read the obituary, we understand that the father was a very ordinary kind of a person, not an achiever, not a winner, a very ordinary man who could make nothing out of his life. And so there's nothing that he is to be remembered for, or there's nothing that he is to be praised for. So this poem is the obituary of such a father. The first line now. Father, when he passed on, left dust on a table of papers, left debts and daughters, a bedwetting grandson named by the toss of a coin after him. So here, as I mentioned, is a father who left nothing much behind for his children. So you can almost feel that the narrator, maybe the son, is not quite pleased with his father. And there is almost a tone of complaint that we can read into these lines when he says that when my father passed on, he left nothing for us except dust on the on a table of papers. And he left debts, though he did not leave us any riches or money behind, he left us ample debts and daughters. What is the connection between debts and daughters? Because oftentimes in Indian families are forced to take debt in order to get daughters married. And in many cases, we see how families, just in order to keep up their status in society, they go beyond their means to borrow money and conduct a grand wedding for their daughters. And that often leads the family to debt. So here, maybe he left the family in debt because of his daughters. And a daughter is always a cause for financial constraint. So left debts and daughters. A bedwetting grandson named by the toss, and he also left a grandson, a small a baby, who was called, and he's a bedwetting grandson, a little boy who used to wet his bed, and he was named after my father. And a coin was tossed in order to choose the name that should be given to the boy, and that is how he got his grandfather's name. And so this is all that he left. He left some debts and some dust on the table and some daughters and a bedwetting grandson. And he also left us a house in the next stanza. And you can see that the next stanza, you can see an example of enjambment here, where the line from the previous stanza runs into the next one. And you can see the whole poem, that is how it goes. A house that leaned slowly through our growing years on a bent coconut tree in the yard. So a house that was not maintained properly, that was leaning on the bent coconut tree. So the house was getting dilapidated day by day, and their growing years were spent in poverty because they did not have enough money to repair the house. So that too expresses bitterness, that the father was not able to earn enough to keep the family happy or free from poverty. So there too you can sense a feeling of blame against the father. Being the burning type, he burned properly at the cremation as before, easily and at both ends. So he says, and when the father's body was cremated and when it was placed on the fire, he burned properly. Means he didn't create any trouble. He burned very easily at both ends. Maybe because he was used to burning throughout his life. He was always suffering from all sorts of troubles, from anguish because he could not take care of his family. Anyway, he was the burning type, and the body burned very fast, very easily, and left his eye coins in the ashes that didn't look one bit different. So in South India, there is this custom, especially in Tamil Nadu and Karnataka, I guess there is this custom of placing coins on the eyelids of the dead person. And that is what here is mentioned as eye coins. And so after the burning of the body, when the children went there to look at, to rake the ashes and find the bones for the funeral rites, they found that the 2 coins that were placed on his eyes remained just as they were before burning. The burning did not cause any change to them. And they also found several spinal discs, rough, sunburned to cold, the bones of the father, so for sons to pick up. And so under the direction of the priest, the sons would go uh, to the crematorium and they would pick up bones of the deceased person, and they would then take the remains, the mortal remains of the father, the ashes, to, usually according to the Hindu custom, the mortal remains are taken to a river, preferably a place where rivers meet, or a river, and after the funeral rites the ashes are blended into the water. So the person is once again uh, going back to, symbolically, he is once again going back to his origins. He is blended with the elements of the earth. And so here, according to the instructions, as per the instructions of the priest, the sons stand facing east where the three rivers met, and it was a place near the railway station. So there again, near the railway station, you can see how irreverently he's speaking about the whole thing. Otherwise there was no need to mention the railway station there, but then it's all just, it's just a funeral, it's just a ritual. It doesn't seem to go into his heart. There doesn't seem to be any sorrow for the dead father. It's all very mechanical. So they went there, they stood there where the three rivers met, and they could hear the noise from the railway station, and according to what the priest said, they took the bones, they threw it into the river where three rivers met. No long-standing headstone with his full name and two dates to hold in their parenthesis. So they did not put up a headstone or a tombstone to commemorate the place of burial of their father. And so where they would write on a stone, a plaque, they would write the full name and two dates, that is the date where he was born and the date when he died, and everything that went in between. But in this case, they did not bother to put up a headstone with his full name and two dates to hold in their parenthesis. Everything he didn't quite manage to do himself. So what he's trying to say is that there was nothing really that was worth mentioning that my father accomplished, except like there were things, of course, that are related to or that are remembered in connection with him, but those are not things that he can take credit for. Like for instance, his was a cesarean birth. I guess those days a cesarean birth was a rare occurrence, and so his father was born in a Brahmin ghetto, in a place where Brahmins alone lived, and he uses the word ghetto. You see that? So ghetto again is a place which is overcrowded and suffocating. Doesn't seem to be very happy about the origins of his father either. And so he was born through a cesarean birth in a Brahmin ghetto. So these are stories that he has heard maybe from his grandmother about his father's birth. And his death by heart failure in the fruit market. And again, the death too was quite unremarkable. When he had gone to the fruit market, he suddenly had a heart attack, and he died there in the market. So these are the only two things worth mentioning in connection with the father. There is nothing else. And these two are things that he did not do. It just happened so. So you can see the indifference that he feels towards his father, his lack of respect, his lack of understanding of his father, of the difficult life the man lived. You feel that there is a tone of blaming throughout, that you didn't do enough for us, you didn't leave us anything. And then he says, but someone told me, he got 2 lines in an inside column of a Madras newspaper sold by the kilo, exactly 4 weeks later to street hawkers. And here again enjambment, the line runs on to the next stanza, who sell it in turn to the small groceries where I buy salt. So then he says that I heard that there was an obituary on my father. Some 2 lines or something was there in the newspaper about my father, and it came in some newspaper that is sold. Newspapers are often after reading, they are immediately sold. And the street hawkers in India, it's a very common sight. They come to your houses and they take the newspapers by, they weigh it in kilos and they give us a meager amount. And then these people in turn, they sell these newspapers to groceries, because in groceries we know that most of the commodities in Indian shops, the small scale groceries, are wrapped in newspaper cones. If you have seen what the salesman does in the shop, he just takes a newspaper and very deftly twists the paper and makes it a cone, and he puts whatever salt or coriander, whatever, and then he deftly again covers it and hands it over to you. That's how it is done. And so that is what usually happens to newspapers. And he says that I generally read these newspapers for fun, because I too do that sometimes, especially if it is a newspaper which I don't purchase at home, another one, or maybe a newspaper from another state, another language which I happen to know to read. Immediately after I remove the contents of that newspaper, I spread it out and I just press out the creases and read the tidbits here and there. It's an interesting activity. And so this person too says that I usually read these newspapers which come into the kitchen where something is wrapped, and I read them for fun. And lately I have started reading them once again in the hope of finding those obituary lines. So there, in those lines, you feel that after all, the son did have some affection for his father, because he says, these days, after I heard somebody mentioning that my father's obituary had come in the newspaper, now I've made it a habit to read these pieces of newspapers that come into my house. Earlier I used to read it for fun, but lately I have started reading it in the hope of finding those obituary lines. So there you can see the the bitterness dominated the rest of the poem, but towards the end, though he tries to hide it, it comes out. The love that he had for his father, the affection maybe which he never showed his father because he was so angry with him, it is revealed when he says that now I am desperately looking for those two lines. I wonder what was written about my father. And the concluding lines, and he left us a changed mother and more than one annual ritual. So another thing that he left us is a changed mother. So maybe the mother is heartbroken. For one thing, she's changed because now she has become a widow. And so all color has been, as far as a Brahmin widow is considered, all color has been removed from her life. She can no more wear the kumkum in her forehead. She cannot wear bangles. She cannot wear flowers in her hair. She cannot wear colored saris. So in that way, a widowed mother is a changed mother. And maybe if the mother was truly in love with her father, that again leaves a changed mother, because now she has lost her beloved partner. She is alone. She is lonely. And she has lost her laughter. So in that way too, it's a changed mother. And more than one annual ritual. So another thing, one more thing that he left behind is an added annual ritual. So hereafter, every year, the son has to perform one additional ritual. And that ritual is the annual funeral or memorial rites of his father. So that is the that is the poem Obituary. It often reminds me of another poem, an elegy in memory of W.E. Yeats, where the author Auden writes in a very unconventional style. It is not, though it is an elegy, it is not the usual kind of elegy where the death of a dear person is mourned in in elaborate detail, but it is kind of matter of fact. So here too you can see that there is a mock ironic tone throughout, a lack of affection except in the last few lines. And when we read the poems of A K Ramanujan, we often feel that the many years of his life which he spent abroad in the USA as a Westerner has definitely had an impact on his outlook and his attitude to life. He often looks at Indian or more broadly speaking, Oriental rites and rituals with the detached outlook of one who's removed from this, of a foreigner. And he speaks like one who does not believe in all these traditions but just tolerates them for the sake of others. So that attitude of a Westerner looking upon the Eastern world and its culture and its life with a kind of sarcasm can be seen in many of the poems of A K Ramanujan. Now, this poem is also a very popular poem of the poet, and it is remembered for its unique style and the theme of how an obituary can be written in this manner too, about a person who has done nothing outstanding in his life, who often leaves the family in a lurch, who leaves the children not knowing how to go onward in life. So the bitterness, the unhappiness, and the suppressed love is all revealed so beautifully in this poem. Thank you.